specialists, customizing your vision to your lifestyle with the new light adjustable cataract lens technology. More information at floridaeyespecialists.com. Volunteers in Medicine has been providing health care for the working uninsured for over 20 years. With over 200 dedicated medical volunteers, Volunteers in Medicine operates clinics in West Jacks and South San Marco. We're committed to a healthier community. More at vimjacks.org. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler. On today's First Coast Connect, we explore the pros and cons of Florida's recreational pot proposal, Amendment 3. We're talking to people on all sides of the debate. Then we continue our local election coverage with Jacksonville Beach mayor candidate Georgette Dumont. She faces Christine Hoffman on November 5th. And an interactive art event that promises to leave spectators puzzled. Join the conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Election Day is in 2 weeks. Former President Donald Trump is focusing much of his energy on swing states. NPR's Danielle Kurtzleben reports, in addition to his rallies, Trump has set up several events focused on specific demographic groups that he needs to win.
Trump had 3 North Carolina events Monday, including a press conference focusing on the recovery from Hurricane Helene. At that event, he repeated lies about how the Biden administration is spending FEMA money. Tuesday, Trump is scheduled to speak at a roundtable for Latino leaders at his golf club in Doral, Florida. Some polls show Trump having made gains with Latinos compared to past elections. He will then come back to North Carolina for a Tuesday evening rally in Greensboro. Thus far, he also has events scheduled for Georgia and Nevada this week, 2 more states where polls show he and Harris are neck and neck. Danielle Kurtzleben, NPR News, Charlotte.
Vice President Harris campaigned in 3 swing states yesterday: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. She was joined by Republican and former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who has endorsed Harris. Cheney says Trump is not fit to be president, and she says other Republicans who want to support Harris can do so privately.
I certainly have many Republicans who will say to me, I can't be public. They do worry about a whole range of things, including violence, but they'll do the right thing. And I would just remind people, if you're at all concerned, you can vote your conscience and not ever have to say a word to anybody. And there will be millions of Republicans who do that on November 5th.
Vice President Harris will sit for an interview today with NBC News. She'll also be questioned by Telemundo. That interview will air tomorrow. A federal judge in Baton Rouge is weighing whether a challenge to Louisiana's new 10 Commandments law can proceed. From member station WWNO, Aubrey Uhas reports on yesterday's hearing.
The plaintiffs, 9 Louisiana families, some religious, some not, argue their children will be harmed if the 10 Commandments are posted in every public school classroom, which a new law requires. Their attorneys have asked a judge to stop the law from taking effect while the case makes its way through the courts. But attorneys for the state argue plaintiffs don't have a case until the law takes effect in January. For that reason, they've asked the judge to dismiss the suit. If he throws out the case, plaintiffs can try again once the posters are hung up in schools. The plaintiffs' attorneys say their case isn't the only legal challenge to the law. So even if this case doesn't move forward, it's possible another one will. For NPR News, I'm Aubrey Uhas in New Orleans.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Israel. He is meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. NPR has learned Blinken will talk to the Israeli leader about increasing aid to Gaza. You're listening to NPR. Officials in Cuba say Tropical Storm Oscar left at least 6 people.
And you're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning, I'm Stephen Ponson. The funeral for Jacksonville Corrections Officer Brad McNew, who was murdered while intervening in a domestic issue just over a week ago, will be held next hour at St. Joseph's Catholic Church on Old St. Augustine Road in Mandarin. The service will be followed by a procession to Hartage Giddens Oak Lawn Cemetery for a flyover and other tributes. The memorial mass is open to the public. The sheriff's office says that the family is deeply appreciative of the overwhelming community support. The 24-year sheriff's office veteran was off duty when he went to help a woman involved in a violent dispute early on October 12th at a truck stop on Duval Road, police say. He was shot by a man in a car who then fled. Demaria Grant was arrested the next day in North Carolina for murder and other charges and will be returned to Jacksonville to face those charges. Florida State College at Jacksonville has a new name for its Manta Ray mascot, Razor Ray. The school says Razor Ray was selected by students, faculty, and staff from a list of 6 finalists that were selected during the name nomination window. The Manta Ray was first announced as the school's mascot during the 2024 commencement ceremony back in May, and the costume design, well, that was revealed last month. This afternoon in Jacksonville, we're going to have mostly sunny skies with highs in the low 80s, just a slight chance of rain this afternoon. Partly cloudy overnight with lows in the mid-60s, mostly sunny tomorrow.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Linda Mood Bell Learning Centers, online instruction available anytime, anywhere for students to catch up or get ahead in reading, comprehension, and math. lindamoodbell.com/NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, looking for the straight dope on Florida's Amendment 3, we're talking with people on all sides of the debate over legalizing marijuana. Later in the program, the challenger hoping to unseat the mayor of Jacksonville Beach. But first, Florida's recreational pot proposal, Amendment 3, is polling at over 60%, but a lot can happen in the next few weeks. Here to discuss what the bill would allow and its implications, we're joined by Dr. Marla Golden, longtime pain and addiction specialist here in Jacksonville and dean of the Osteopathic Medicine program at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, South Georgia campus. Good morning, Marla.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
We're also joined by Sally Peebles, attorney and partner in Florida's Vicente Law Office. It's a national law firm specializing in cannabis law and policy. Good morning, Sally.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And we're joined via video by Will Jones III. He could not be here in person, but we're very glad that he's on the line. He's the Director of Community Engagement and Outreach for SAM, which stands for Smart Approaches to Marijuana. Good morning, Will.
Good morning. Good to be here.
So just to help our listeners get their bearings, if you would, I'd like each of you to just sort of state where you stand on Amendment 3 for the benefit of our listeners. We'll start with you, Marla Golden.
Okay, thank you. I guess I would have to say that I am not opposed to this amendment. I would be for it for a number of reasons with some very distinct caveats based on my medical experience and just my experience at large.
Okay, we'll explore those caveats as we move along. Sally Peebles, tell us where you stand on this amendment.
I am absolutely supportive of it. I believe that the war on drugs has failed and regulation works, and we've seen it work throughout the country, and I hope that Florida makes the decision to vote yes on Amendment 3.
All right. Will Jones III, where do you stand on Amendment 3? Can you hear us, Will?
I can hear you now. I lost audio, but it looks like it just came back.
Just give us briefly what your position is on Amendment 3.
Yes. So we at SAM believe that when it comes to marijuana policy, that legalization and commercialization would be bad for public health. And one of the slogans of our organization is preventing another big tobacco. So we look and see what the tobacco industry has done with addictive products like cigarettes. We look and see what the alcohol industry has done and continues to do today. And we also see what Big Pharma has done in terms of addiction. And so the question that we pose is, why will we be creating another addictive recreational drug industry? We do think that we can move from punitive criminalization of marijuana and having people have arrest records and things like that in better ways, such as decriminalization. That would be a better route forward rather than creating another addictive recreational drug industry.
All right. For the benefit of those listening, we'll say that Amendment 3 essentially would legalize recreational marijuana in the state. It would allow medical marijuana treatment centers and other state licensed entities to sell marijuana for personal use to adults over the age of 21. Medical marijuana is currently legal. That passed in 2016 with 71%. And since you touched on it, Will, let's just go to the issue of social justice that has been at the forefront of this discussion in terms of decriminalizing marijuana in small amounts, and pushing back on what a lot of people view as a troubled history in terms of drug enforcement in this country that has often targeted minority populations. Even today, about 3 or 4 times as many Black people are stopped and arrested for marijuana possession than white people. So
yes,
the argument is, this would alleviate some of that. What does Sam say about that?
Yeah, so I want to point out that decriminalization and legalization and commercialization are 2 completely different policy positions with 2 completely different impacts on public health. So if Amendment 4 were about decriminalization, that would be a completely different discussion, and something that honestly we as an organization would be something that we'd be engaged in as a potentially good way forward in terms of reforming past punitive laws that may have been enforced unfairly towards minorities, people of color. But what Amendment 4 is commercialization and legalization, which would enable, it to be marketed, would enable multi-million, billion-dollar corporations to invest in this. And literally their bottom line comes from having more people use as much as possible. And a lot of that slides into addiction when you talk about something like marijuana. So decriminalization and commercialization and legalization are 2 completely different policy things with 2 completely different impacts and implications for public health. And that's why we oppose commercialization and legalization.
Sally, I want to ask you about that. I mean, Will is saying that that commercializing this product will increase the sale, that would be the goal of the companies that are selling it, and therefore make it more used as opposed to less.
So let's first touch on the social justice issues that you brought up. As you mentioned, white and Black people consume marijuana at the exact same rate, but African Americans are arrested at 4 times of their white counterparts. And there's a lot of talk about how they're not incarcerated in Florida. Well, just the arrest can have long-term impacts on these people. They can lose their license. They can lose their driver's license. They can lose their professional license. They can lose their eligibility for public housing. They can have a difficult getting a loan. So it can really have lifelong negative impacts. And while decriminalization could remove that, and I do support decriminalization, what we really need to see is to regulate these products and place them in make sure they're tested and placed into a dispensary where you have to get ID'd to have access to this. A decriminalization does not do that. Decriminalization would remove the criminal penalties, which is great, but I think we take it a step further and regulate it and make sure and put our time and resources into keeping these products safe.
What about the argument, though, that this would just result in a net increase in consumption of marijuana?
So I think we all just need to take a moment and realize that cannabis is widely available and widely used, whether it is legal or not. Amendment 3 is not going to change that. So really, we have 2 choices to make. We can bury our head in the sands and just keep it criminalized. That hasn't worked. Or we can be adults, recognize the issue, and change laws so that we place our limited resources on not placing users in jail, but instead focusing on the education around the cannabis use, testing it, putting it in packaging so people know what they're purchasing. And that is what we've seen has worked on keeping these products safe.
I'm going to ask you about that, Marla, and I'll let Sally readdress it if she wants to, but I mean, certainly in my own personal experience, I know plenty of people that go and buy legal marijuana when they're perhaps visiting other states where it's legal, that would not otherwise be illegally buying marijuana or perhaps getting a medical marijuana card. Do you have a concern as a physician about an overall increase in the use of marijuana if it's recreationally legal?
I really don't. I think it just changes the availability and people's ability to buy it or get it in perhaps a better state, a more controlled, I don't mean state as in Pennsylvania or Florida, but in a better way. I think that when we talk about decriminalization, we're all acknowledging that people are using marijuana. And we're saying that this is happening, this is the state of affairs. So, we don't want to penalize people. I honestly agree with Sally. I think that people are going to use marijuana. They are using marijuana. They've used marijuana for decades. And I think they're going to continue. I don't think that this legalization will necessarily translate to an overwhelming increase in usage.
We're talking about Amendment 3. That is the amendment that would legalize recreational marijuana in Florida. And you are welcome to join our conversation. You can call us at 904-549-2937, or you can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also reach out on social media. We have a call from Jeff on the west side. Good morning, Jeff. Go ahead.
Good morning. Hey, a real quick question is there's been several states that have legalized recreational use for marijuana, so there's got to be data available to support each of your claims. My concern about the whole affair is one concern. It's driving under the influence of marijuana. We have field sobriety tests and alcohol breath things that provide instant data on alcohol levels, contents, but we have nothing for THC. So if my kid gets hit by somebody driving with some level of THC in his system, he can claim that he was high last night, but he was sober when he was driving, which can be a complete lie. So my concern is simply, is the only concern I have about this whole affair is driving under the influence of THC. Is there any data to support that, or has there been any other means of finding out is anybody field sobriety tests? So
Yeah,
thank
thanks,
you.
Jeff. I mean, I know that there has been some work developing field sobriety that would detect kind of an active, intense level of THC, but certainly there are people who are driving under the influence of marijuana and would continue to.
So I completely agree. No one should be operating a car or flying a plane or operating any heavy machinery while on any controlled substance, whether that be alcohol or marijuana or a pain pill. And in no instance is a vote for legalization a vote allowing people to drive high. In fact, Amendment 3 specifically says that nothing in this section shall permit the operation of any vehicle, aircraft, train, or boat while under the influence of marijuana. And, I know I already said this, but this is an issue. People are driving high now, and I don't think more people will be driving high if Amendment 3 is passed. But what we could do if Amendment 3 is passed, we can place our resources in educating on the dangers of driving high. And if this was an actual concern, by the prohibitionists, I think they would try to be criminalizing alcohol. Like, we trust adults to consume alcohol, and we trust them not to drive. We educate them on that. The same issue, the same things can be applied here in cannabis.
Could I jump in, Ann?
Yes, sure. Although I want to give Will a chance to respond to that, but yes, just briefly.
My concern is that we are confusing impairment with usage. There is a legal limit to alcohol because there have been studies done and testing done that shows when there is impairment. Just because someone has a glass of wine or perhaps even a pain pill does not necessarily correlate to impairment and a dangerous use of a vehicle or being in the workplace. I think we will have to really identify what impairment looks like from a certain level of THC and make our regulations based on that. We can't confuse usage with impairment.
Yeah, Will, I want to ask you, because there is this comparison to regulated substances like alcohol or even pharmaceutical drugs. Do you think that that is an apt or a fair comparison when it comes to the regulation of marijuana?
I actually do think it's a fair comparison, and I think that's the exact problem. Actually, when I started working on this issue where I lived at the time, I tell people this all the time, the first store that I would get to when I walked out of my door in any direction would be a liquor store. I could go a little bit farther and get to a convenience store covered with advertisements for tobacco, alcohol, and the lottery. That's the reality still for millions and millions of people in communities of color in the United States. And we've seen that the marijuana industry in Colorado and other places where it's been legalized has followed the same pattern of the alcohol and tobacco industries, which are predatory marketing drug companies and also pharmaceuticals to an extent that do take advantage of disadvantaged communities and populations with their marketing practices, with their targeting practices, and the placement of their stores. You look at Denver, Colorado, there's one pot business for every 40 residents in minority communities in Denver, more than Starbucks and McDonald's combined. Therefore, in Florida on Amendment 3, you have $40 million invested by, I think it's TrueLeaf, a cannabis company there, because there is a good return on investment. This is a drug. There is a lot of substance use and addiction that comes with this. Cannabis use disorder has risen dramatically with legalization across the United States. And so there is a very good comparison to alcohol and tobacco, and that is to say that these recreational legal drugs have a big impact, a big negative impact on public health. And so we would hope that we could now learn the lessons from the past of alcohol, of tobacco, and of, to an extent, pharmaceuticals, and not welcome these industries that are literally profiting off of addiction. And to the point about driving under the influence, when you look at the data from Colorado, when you look at it from Washington, Oregon State, and others that have done this, marijuana is now the #1 intoxicant in fatal accidents. There's been an increase in fatal accidents in these states that have legalized by over, in Washington State, I believe it was over 100%, same thing in Colorado. You could argue, well, we don't know the level of THC that was in their systems, but we can look at the data and say that since legalization has happened, fatal vehicle accidents have dramatically risen in these states. And AAA, you can look at the data from them in Washington State, for example, and others, where they say this is the data. Again, we can say, well, did it just happen to have happened in all of these states that have legalized? I mean, I think at a certain point we have to say we see the pattern with alcohol. We see what's happened with tobacco. We've seen what's happened with the pharmaceuticals. Unfortunately, there is a population, a percentage of the population that will use these substances irresponsibly. Not everyone, but some people will. And so the question is, do we want to allow companies to profit to the tune of billions of dollars off of marketing and selling this, or should we choose something where we simply decriminalize instead of welcoming in an industry that's profiting off of addiction?
Okay, we're talking about Amendment 3. We have a call from John in Riverside. Good morning, John. Go ahead.
Good morning. The person that's worried about having corporations advertising and trying to promote marijuana, yeah, okay, we have that problem with alcohol and other things. But what's the alternative for pot? The alternative is to deal with criminals. If you're not going to buy it from a corporation that's controlled and regulated and clearly visible what they're doing, then you have to go to dealers, perhaps in bad neighborhoods. When corporations fight over market share, they buy more advertising. When cartels do it, they shoot more bullets.
Yeah, you don't have to, that's once again kind of, I think, a false analogy that we hear often with this. We could look, one, at other countries like Portugal, right, where they have decriminalized marijuana and other drugs. You don't have to go to, and that's been done to a measure of success depending on the metrics that we're looking at, right? So the only answer isn't automatically welcoming, again, these industries. And in the U.S., the tobacco industry has invested billions and billions of dollars into legalization. Philip Morris has invested billions of dollars into this, and as well as other major alcohol companies like Heineken, Blue Moon, Molson Coors, and others. So this is a very unique kind of American capitalist solution to this issue of drugs. Like, oh yeah, the best way to move forward in policies is to create an industry around it. And I think there's a lot of public health impacts from that. But directly, there could be things that, where you could say, well, if someone grows a plant or two in their basement or backyard, that's not going to be punitive. So you could say if somebody wants it, they don't have to go to a black market. They could grow it in their basement or their backyard, something like that. And that could be decriminalized. And so it's not necessitating that people go to a black market. Furthermore, the other interesting caveat to this is that so far, The black market there's no data that shows that it has actually significantly decreased in states where it's been legalized because of things like taxes and things like that. So if you look at, you could Google this right now, I'm not making this, Google on CNN, California black market marijuana. They had to call in the National Guard after legalization because the problem with the cartels had actually risen, not decreased. And so even this idea that it's going to cut into the black market, there's no data to show that it's done that.
Okay, well, I want to take another call here if I can. Bob in Atlantic Beach. Good morning, Bob. Go ahead.
Good morning. I would like to point out a potential problem with Amendment 3. If a person who works on a commercial vessel smokes just one joint and steps on land and steps on a commercial vessel, they've committed a federal felony. Also, if a recreational boater does the same thing, they have also committed a federal felony if the boat is on federal waters. And the St. Johns River, as an example, is federal water. This is something that we haven't looked at yet that we have to figure out how to handle. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. We also have a message from John on Facebook. He says, I've asked for feedback from friends in Colorado and Minnesota, and the one thing they consistently say is that everywhere they go now, it smells like weed. Is there anything in the amendment that would require marijuana to be used in private, similar to how we cannot walk down the street with a beer? I actually want to hear a little bit from Sheriff T.K. Waters. He addressed this very issue. Let's take a listen.
And so Florida has the Florida Indoor Clean Air Act. Right? They don't want people smoking cigarettes in restaurants or indoor spaces. Marijuana smoking is the most offensive smell to me ever. And I think a lot of states that have already done that, and I don't think you expect me to say anything different because I'm a policeman. But a lot of the states that have already done that have buyer's remorse.
I want to ask you about that, Sally. Sheriff, probably as a law enforcement officer, has a more visceral reaction to the smell, but it's a very pungent smell. And, we heard stories about at the U.S. Open where the court was smelling like Snoop Dogg's living room. It can be very overwhelming.
Yeah, so first of all, I lived in Colorado for 20 years, and I will tell you that we always would read these, media reports about the smell of it, and we would all laugh and say it smelled like marijuana way before it was ever legalized in Colorado. But just like alcohol, through the passage of laws, we can control where these substances are smoked. In Colorado, you can only smoke in the privacy of your own home or in a consumption lounge. We won't even have consumption lounges here in Florida, so it most likely would be in the privacy of your own home. If people break the law and smoke outside, then they will be arrested. Just like you can't drink alcohol on the street, we have controlled where you can consume alcohol through laws and implementation of you have to have a liquor license to sell it. You have to be inside the bar to drink it. You can't walk around.
But enforcement can be hard. I mean, as the example of the U.S. Open, they didn't know who was creating that smell.
Right.
They weren't visible. They could not tell.
Yeah, so there's nothing in Amendment 3 says that you can smoke anywhere you want.
Gotcha. We've got a call from Daryl in St. Augustine. Good morning, Daryl. Go ahead.
Yeah, good morning. The fellow that says we should decriminalize it, hey, great idea. Just as soon as you go out and get all of the required signatures and put it on the next election's ballot, I'll vote for that one too. But right now, this is the best we got, my friend.
All right, Daryl. Thanks for the call. Appreciate it. We also have a call from Rick on the south side. Good morning, Rick. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, Rick.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just one quick question. I'd like to know the day that this amendment is passed, hypothetically, the day that this amendment is passed, just say the next day after it has passed, if I am pulled over and they see this in my car, will I be arrested? Yes or no? That'll be my question. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Rick. There will take some time to implement an amendment. Only goes so far, then the legislature, Sally, has to create the law to implement it.
So Amendment 3 will go into effect 6 months after it is voted on. In that time period, the Florida legislature will draft the implementing statute to see how this will be played out. It is not going to be decriminalized. Amendment 3 allows MMTCs, medical marijuana treatment centers, to grow it and sell it. So if you buy it from them, you will be you will not have any criminal liability.
Okay.
However, I will say that once in most states that is legalized, legal enforcement of these issues does go down just because it's almost a silly thing to arrest someone
Right.
when something's legal.
So, Marla, your big concern is implementation and how this looks. So let's ask you now, I mean, what do you want to see in terms of the law created around this if it passes?
I think we have to be very thoughtful about those regulations. I think it includes everything from no smoking and no smoking areas, because we know there are people with respiratory diseases who can't stand the smell of cigarette smoke, and people with migraines who can't stand the scent of perfume. I mean, let's think about it. If it's a strong scent, we have to be thinking about that. But all the way to perhaps looking at the potency of the formulations that are available, to try to move away from or to prevent as much of that overuse or abuse situation.
And the rate of, the potency is a very big deal. I mean, we think of kind of the Cheech and Chong era when potency was really around, 4%.
Very
It
different.
gets as high as 90% now, but it's on average, 15 to 20% in just standard products that are sold. It's so much more intense. And it's having some effects, especially on young people.
It can. It definitely can. But I think that higher strength products can still be used responsibly, and that's why I think that this is going to have to be a concerted effort between lawmakers and legislators as well as physicians. We all had a lot of input during the opioid crisis to maintain prudent treatment for patients who needed it, for people who needed it. Now, I know we're not really talking about that medical aspect, but and certainly no one promoted the use of opioids recreationally because they're not meant to be used recreationally. But in this case, I think that if we're a thoughtful group, that we can do it right and we can make it available for anyone who is utilizing it in whatever way they're choosing to.
Will, does SAD have a position? I mean, this is polling, as we said, at 67% in terms of approval ratings in a poll we discussed here yesterday. If it's implemented, does SAD have recommendations and thoughts about how you would like to see it implemented?
Yeah, so one of the things that you mentioned there, high potency things, so we'd be looking in states where it has been legalized, one of the things that we are pushing for is potency caps and things like that, because that is one of the tools of the industry that creates, that contributes to substance use, cannabis use disorder, and addiction. The higher potency products can create or sustain that more easily, as well as you mentioned, mental health problems for particularly then we can regulate it and you have to show ID to get at a shop and all that. And I understand the theory of that, but when we look at data of that, that's not what happens. The states where it's legal have the highest use because it's become normalized. You have billboards, you have social media campaigns, you have all of these things. And we can say, well, we don't want the industry to do that, but I would just point out what Juul vaping has done in the space of about 5 years. They went from a relatively non-existent company to one valued over $15 billion in just one company single-handedly reversed rates of smoking of nicotine among kids, one company in the space of about 5 years. This shows that still today in 2025, we do not have the regulatory capacity to push back against the predatory marketing practices of these industries that make millions and billions of dollars off of their products that are addictive. And so we are going to push for potency caps. We are going to push back on any type of marketing, any type of advertising and things like that. Unfortunately, again, you have big pockets from these industries that push back strongly against any regulation, including placement of shops. We've seen that in Colorado and other places. So it's always a fight against the industry, but those are things that we're going to be looking at and sounding the alarm about.
Thanks, Will. And Sally, I'll give you the last word here. He mentioned the huge amounts of money that are behind this. Your organization represents some people who have huge amounts of money that are, stand to benefit significantly from the passage of this. Do you just want to address that?
Absolutely. I think the financial impetus to do this, or the political impetus to do this, is completely irrelevant. This is the right thing to do. It's the safer thing to do, and we need to regulate marijuana just like alcohol.
But I mean, surely the profit motive matters, right? I mean, if somebody is backing this bill because they stand to make millions or billions, like that is going to drive their judgment to some extent.
Potentially, but I think that I'm grateful that True Leaf is putting $40 million of their own money to pass this. This is the safer route, and I think it's irrelevant why they're doing it. Honestly, I'm just thrilled that someone is.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge topic, and I thank you all for bringing different perspectives to it. Thank you so much for being here, and we will definitely revisit this as we move along. Will Jones, Sally Peebles, Marla Golden. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, our election coverage continues with Jacksonville Beach mayoral candidate Georgette. Welcome back. Last week, we spoke with incumbent Mayor Chris Hoffman about her goals and priorities as she seeks a second term as the leader of Jacksonville Beach. And today, I'm joined by her opponent, Georgette Dumont. Good morning, Georgette.
Good morning, Ann. Thank you for having me.
It's nice to have you. What do you most love about Jacksonville Beach? And what do you wish people kind of understood more about it?
What I love about Jack's Beach, my husband and I moved here in 2010. We just love the laid-back, beachy eclecticness of the beach. There were higher-end places where you could go in your shorts and your flip-flops, and I'm seeing that we're kind of losing that over time. In downtown, we're getting a lot more high-end places, which is great, but that's what we're getting is the high-end places. We need more eclectic businesses within the community to match the residents and the eclecticness of all our different neighborhoods.
Are people getting priced out of Jacksonville Beach?
Oh, definitely. If my husband and I got our jobs at UNF today, we would not be living at the beach. We wouldn't be able to afford it.
Wow. Okay. So is there a single issue? I mean, you were on the city council from 2018 to 2022. You also served for 6 years on the planning commission. Was there a single issue that kind of got you involved in beach politics in the first place?
Overdevelopment. So when we moved here in 2010, we chose Jacksonville Beach specifically because we liked the culture of the beach. And over time, we started to see that, homes are getting knocked down and big homes are getting put in. And so on the planning commission, I saw a lot of the issues that people were having, especially our residents. So residents were having more of an issue trying to redo their own homes without knocking it down than somebody who would just come in and knock down a home and build a 3-story house.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, and that's something that we really need to work on. How do we make government work for the residents instead of against the residents?
Were there lessons learned? I mean, working on a planning commission, you really get to see a lot of what's coming, the growth, and how it's impacting the city. But it seems like very often there's not a lot of tools to say no or to, push back or modify. There's a lot of emphasis on property rights in this state.
Yes, there are. That's Burt Harris Act. And so we need to be very cautious about when we deny. You need competent and substantial evidence for anybody who's opposing one of the applications.
And the Burt Harris Act basically says that a developer has the right to develop to the highest and best use their property. And very often that means kind of the most intensive and lucrative use.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the city can't take away value from a property. So right now we're redoing a land development code, which says what you can do where in the city. And we have to make sure that we are not taking away the value of anyone's property. But there are ways that we can incentivize residents who live there to be able to do what they want on their property without having to not put up those barriers. So if you want to renovate your property and it's going to be more than 50% of the value, you have to come into compliance, you have to come into code, and that's very problematic for a lot of residents. And so we should be incentivizing them to redo their homes as they're standing instead of knocking them down and building those 3-story structures.
So you're challenging Chris Hoffman, the current mayor. Why are you just more wanting to be mayor, or are you dissatisfied with her performance?
I've watched her. She's been on council for 12 years, 8 on city council and 4 as mayor. And I've watched her. I've been going to all the city council meetings since 2010. So I've seen her work, and I'm doing this not for me. I'm doing this because I've been unhappy with what I've seen, especially in the last 2 years. The residents have come before council at times in large groups, pleading and begging them, please do not pass this, like whichever one. One was the height limit, another one was a townhouse development south of a park. And they could have voted it down with regard to the townhouses. I'm not going to get into the weeds, but they could have tabled it until the code was fixed, and they didn't. And what was worse is how they interacted and spoke with the residents. And you show people respect. I don't care if you are the president or if you're the janitor. You show everyone equal respect, and I didn't feel that the council was showing them respect in both the tone and what was said, as well in just kind of ignoring what the people in the room were there for. The My goal is as so I did listen to my opponent last week, and I know that has had a lot of leadership positions, but leadership isn't a position. Leadership is what you do in any position that you have. So I was on the city council, and during that time we reviewed the charter, and I knew that two items were going to be coming up because of the charter review, the two big ones. The first one was going to be the height limit, revisiting the height limit, and the second one was going to be revisiting the number of bar licenses. These aren't restaurants, it's just bars. And I was in the super minority on council. I knew that I would be one of two, possibly three no votes on any of these issues, so I chose not to run again. I stepped off council and I started the political committee Protect the Beach Life. That was while I was on council, we redid the city's vision and mission, and the vision of the city is to be a vibrant coastal community that embraces the beach life. So I'm like, well, we can't embrace the beach life if we lose the beach life. So the PAC was called Protect the Beach Life, and I worked in concert with another volunteer organization, and I raised the money, did the artwork, got the signs out, went through the voters list, and the amendment failed 82-18. That is unprecedented for anything to go for 82%. And that was there was a unifying voice in the community, and it was people far to the left, far to the right as well, all agreeing that for different reasons that this is not right for our city. And it's time that the residents have a larger voice and are heard.
And so the issue of height limits has long been, a contentious one at the beach. That was something, the citizens obviously did not want to budge on. Um, are there other issues like that you think that the city has not been hearing residents when it comes to what they want versus what the city's doing?
Well, part of it's overdevelopment, the number of bars, wanting more. Residents want more interaction with their city. Right now, one thing that I said is, as mayor, I will hold quarterly town halls. So this way, residents can actually come in and we can have a conversation about what some of the issues are that they're facing to try and fix the problem.
How is that different than just having a council meeting?
At a council meeting, there is a 3-minute. Any resident has 3 minutes to speak to council about a concern or an issue, but then there's no feedback from the council. So it's just 3 minutes. This is my problem, and no response. And that's not really a good way to get to how to solve problems.
Right.
So my background is I'm a professor at the University of North Florida. I teach public administration, so I teach how you run government. And I know that, so the rest of my department is, a lot of them are political scientists. And so you have a lot of politicians that are more of a show horse. I'm the workhorse. I get the job done, and that's the public administration versus the politics.
Interesting. I'm talking to Georgette Dumont. She is running for mayor of Jacksonville Beach. If you have calls or questions, you can reach us at 904-549-2937, or you can email firstcoastconnect at wjct.org. One of the issues that you've raised is the issue of crime in Jacksonville Beach. And as an outsider, I feel like crime is still relatively low in Jacksonville Beach compared to other places in the city, but that may just be my perception. What is your perception?
The crime is low compared to Jacksonville, but it's been increasing over time, and people don't feel safe out in the community. I tend not to go out at night. My opponent is looking at it from a policing point of view. And when I see it, and I agree, we need to make sure that the police have the resources they need to be effective. But I see it as a larger issue. It's also about the environment. And is the environment such that people feel it's okay to commit crimes in these areas? And so that really goes back onto the city to make sure it's doing its place to keep its public spaces updated and vibrant and welcoming to a variety of people, not so the infamous one is the lot. There is a public lot right outside at the base of the pier, and it's been gated. It has a chain link fence around it, and it has pavers in it, and it looks horrible. And it's been like that for years, and that's kind of like one of the welcoming areas. And that's not the only one. If you look around, the like the mulch in the downtown, these are small things. It doesn't match. In some places you have dark, some places you have red, some places now you have the stone type stuff, and it just looks bad. So you need to kind of bring it up a notch.
Yeah, and you think that that will have like an impact on through the environment on decreasing crime, or
Yeah, and that goes with the broken windows theory. If you take care of the small stuff, like the broken windows and the small crimes, it helps to alleviate some of the larger ones.
there was a issue a few years back about the fire department. The fire department that existed in Jacksonville Beach was sort of subsumed and taken over by the Jacksonville Fire Rescue Department, and that was something that I believe you generally opposed at the time.
Uh, and two other council members, along with all the residents who spoke who weren't part of the fire department. So none of the residents who attended the meeting wanted us to contract out our fire services. It was a long and contentious meeting, and I saw that there was an issue. There was definitely an issue, but it was a management issue. It wasn't a structural issue. My main concern is that our fire department answers to the Jacksonville mayor, not to our city. And there have been some changes. So the changes with the first responders that are needed for our downtown events and things like that, and that really impacted a lot of our events in the downtown area as well, and not in a good way. So that was my main concern. Like I said, it was management issues. It wasn't a structural issue. When it got voted down, it was revisited at the same meeting, and we tried to make it so, all right, so if it's going to be this close on council, one person should not get to decide this. Let's put it to the voters for a vote. And that was voted down as well. And again, this is just like that record of not paying attention to what our residents are really asking for.
And in retrospect, has that been a negative for the city?
Not in terms of service. JFRD is a great fire department. I have former students, and they are who work there. They're smart as a whip. So it's in no way does it reflect JFRD. What it reflects more is the council's the council ignoring what the residents want. And so yes, you can have lower property insurance rates because of the ISO ratings and all that, but that's information that people should be given to make the decision as to whether this is better for them or not. That's the biggest piece that I think that we're lacking in our government, is reaching out to residents, letting them know and understand all the different facets of some of these problems that we're facing and get their input.
Have the insurance rates gone down as a result of that?
For
that particular.
I don't know overall. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I know my insurance rates haven't.
Yeah, nobody's insurance rate seems to be going down. I mean, speaking of that, let's talk just a little bit about resiliency and climate change, because that is a priority for any mayor of any beach city in Florida. So do you have any differences between you and your opponent in terms of how you would address the threat of climate change?
No, we're pretty much on the same page with regard to resiliency.
And how do you think you're doing?
I think we're doing okay with we're already built out, and so we can't already automatically force certain things. But we're better with the protection of on the intercoastal side. That's the side that we actually have the flooding. With the flooding tends to happen on that side. When I was on council, we made sure that the city was doing our part to try and alleviate some of the flooding in the sanctuary. It's one of the neighborhoods there
that floods quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
And by redirecting a lot of the stormwater into a different direction, so this way we're not overfilling their retention ponds.
Yeah, and so civility is also one of the points that you've raised. I mean, what specific strategy would you have to make things keep them civil in those kind of conversations?
So with regard to the residents, there are ways that you handle large crowds that may disagree with you. And one of those would be that I know that we're all very excited, but we want to get out of here sometime within the near future. So please, if you feel the need to clap and applaud, use your silent hands, and make sure that we treat everyone with respect. We need to actually just explicitly state that. That was not the route that my opponent would take.
All right. Well, Georgette Dumont, she's running for mayor of Jacksonville Beach. Georgette, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, an interactive live art experience is coming to Atlantic Beach.
ElderSource's T-Care program can help caregivers avoid burnout. Caregivers that assist Northeast Florida residents aged 60 or older may be eligible to get resources for themselves at no cost. More information at myeldersource.org. Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you.
Hi, David Brancaccio, host of the Marketplace Morning Report here. You may also remember me anchoring the TV program Now on PBS, and I would be very honored if you could join me and WJCT Public Media President and CEO David McGowan on Wednesday, November the 20th. We'll be on stage in Jacksonville exploring everything from how to make the economy better serve more people to the importance of building community and plenty more. I cannot wait to meet you, so RSVP today
at wjct.org/events.
See you soon.
Wisconsin is one of the states that will determine the 2024 election. It's also home to some of the most passionate 2020 election deniers. State Elections Commission Chair Ann Jacobs says Wisconsin's vote can be trusted.
100%. I have no doubt in that. And I didn't doubt it in 2016 when Trump won. And I didn't doubt it in 2020 when Joe Biden won. And I'm not going to doubt it in 2024.
That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
On 1A from WAMU and NPR.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
And we're back. This Saturday showcases a painting project designed as a puzzle to encourage audience participation. Joining me to talk about it is artist in residence, Lucas Beaufort. Good morning, Lucas.
Good morning.
Also, Greg Schwartzberger, owner of Hotel Palms, which is hosting the event. Good morning.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having us back.
Nice to have you, Greg. So, Lucas, tell us a little bit about this project. It involves creating several paintings simultaneously.
Yeah, it's called the Puzzle Project. I love to create art to bring people together, so I decided to make a big piece that is composed by 35, 40, or 100, doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, I want people to leave the experience with one of the puzzle, and they're going to be linked together through the whole concept and the whole painting that I'm going to do live. So I want people to link up and become friends at the end of the day.
Awesome. And so, Lucas, we should say you're from France. You live in Cannes?
I was born in Cannes
Okay.
in 1981. And now I live in Normandy since 8 years, near Paris.
Beautiful. And so you've been to Hotel Palms before. How did you connect with Atlantic Beach in the first place?
I think I met Greg, the owner, in 2017. I don't really remember what was the first connection, but I think that we were following each other through Instagram. And it was just like, man, I love what you do. If you want to be there one day and paint something with me at the hotel, let me know. And I think like 3 weeks later, I booked my flight to go there and meet him.
A pretty cool destination. And we should say, I mean, Hotel Palms has a real commitment to art. And so for people who aren't familiar with the mission, it's not just a, renovated motor court, Greg.
No, not at all. Obviously, hospitality is first and foremost, but that translates to our artist residency program. This is Lucas's third time here. He's endeared himself to the community in Atlantic Beach. He's gotten a lot of relationships here. He gets to see friends that he's met and kept contact with over the years.
And so tell us a little bit about his approach and kind of how you're integrating that into the event that's coming up on Saturday.
Sure. So we have a series of activations this week that we're doing with Lucas. Some are at the hotel, some are around the city. So specifically tonight, you can come to the hotel. Lucas has redone the front mural at the hotel. We have an exclusive merchandise drop with LaFave. And
That includes like the shirt that you're wearing today.
yes, it includes the shirt I'm wearing today and then a hat as well. And Thursday will be at the Block Skate Supply in historic Springfield. Friday, we're doing an activation around a 3v3 soccer tournament at JFC Soccer Club off of Patton Park. Lucas will be doing a live painting there and then be adorning some soccer balls with his artwork as well. And then the week culminates Saturday with the puzzle project at the Hotel Palms.
Okay. And so, Lucas, describe how you're going to handle this puzzle project. I mean, you're going to essentially be painting in front of an audience. How much interaction is there between you and the audience? Is it stressful to be creating in front of that, like a crowd?
It's gonna be like a 2 hours and 30 minutes experience. Every time I do the puzzle project, I got to talk to people and explain why. Why am I doing this? Because I love to say that painting is an excuse to do this. Is an excuse to meet people. Because at the end of the day, what I want is meet new people and have new friends and travel the world and know what they do, know their stories. So it's not stressful at all because I'm gonna have people behind me, but I turn around and talk to them, go next to them, and what should I do now? Which color? And sometimes I ask them, do you want to add something? Everything could happen. I want to surprise myself every day, so I know what I'm gonna do, but it might change while doing it.
And so that's ultimately, as you said, a bunch of paintings, but they kind of create a larger painting. But people at the end of this event can take home one of these. Is that right?
Exactly. It's very special because 35 canvases, 35 people would get a piece, and they're gonna be linked together. So then they can just like get a number, the friend's number next to them, and be like, which one you have. And I have a funny story that because I did this in Aspen a few years ago, and this guy took the number of everybody there, and he bought each piece from other people.
He went and bought every piece.
Yeah,
And put the puzzle back
yeah,
together.
he has the puzzle at
Ah.
home. It's not the meaning of the project. I prefer people to keep their piece, but that's the story with Aspen.
So, Greg, it is open to the public. Not everybody gets a painting. Explain how that works. There are
Correct. So
tickets, right?
correct. So the event is open to the public. We'd like the whole community to come out. Sliders is donating specialty oysters. We'll have a happy hour going on. We have some music being selected by a local DJ. There are a limited number of tickets to purchase that will allow you to leave with an original piece of art. So some of these tickets are already selling. There are still some available, but it is a free event to the public. There'll be people there that aren't even thinking about purchasing a ticket now that decide to get one once they watch him paint.
Oh, yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's called the Puzzle Project. It's Saturday at Hotel Palms, and tickets are still available. Lucas Beaufort, Greg Schwartzberger, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Always great to sit with you. Thank you.
Yep. Have
And
a
it's
great
from
project.
it's from 5 to 8.
5 to 8 p.m. Saturday.
Okay, terrific. Great. Well, that's our program. Thanks for listening. And if you missed anything, you can listen to our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight, or you can catch our entire archive on your favorite podcast platform. Join us tomorrow when we discuss how social pressures and bullying impact high school dropout rates. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. World Affairs Council and UNF, partnering to engage citizens in becoming better informed participants in the global community. General David Petraeus will discuss the future of warfare on November 4th. More information at worldaffairscounciljacks.org. The law offices of Phillips, Hunt & Walker proudly support WJCT. Personal injury, criminal defense, and family law. Phillips, Hunt & Walker, committed to justice. 904-444-4444 or floridajustice.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
In the 1990s, autism diagnosis in children increased dramatically. But what about those who grew up before then?